We have some good distinguished speakers today. In fact, what I'm going to do is try to do it this way. We have one in person and two who are Zooming in. I'd like to have the presenter that's in person first present, and I'll introduce him in a second, and then followed by the two from Zoom. I'm going to ask my presenters to confine their comments to about 15 minutes, primarily because we want plenty of time to have discussion, dialogue, questions, Q&A, and as you can see, we have two microphones around the room. If you're interested in asking a question, I would ask that it be a question, not so much as a commentary, but a question so that we can tap into the expertise of the speakers we have here. My name is Mark Clark, president of ASMEA. I'm an emeritus professor of political science and national security studies at California State University, San Bernardino. I'm going to talk for just a second as we open up this section here because, as we all know, this is a big topic going on in the world right now. One of the things that I would have you say or have you think about as you hear the media reports, there's a number of narratives out there about what happened there. This is called Israel's 9/11. That's sort of a misnomer because we lost less than 3,000 people on the day of 9/11. Israel's lost the per capita equivalent of well over 40,000. In addition, 230 plus captives have been taken, and we lost no one taken captive during 9/11. So it's a much different picture than the way the media will present it. The other kind of one that I want to focus on and just take a few moments to talk about before I introduce our first speaker is that, you know, you're going to hear, and I keep hearing this on the news media, this was Israel's intelligence failure. And while that's true, it's only partially true. This was a systemic failure by Israel's government. And what I mean by that is this. There's levels we talk about in strategy of analysis. We look at strategy, operations, tactics, policy, and then we look at intelligence as how it fits into that. And the reason why this becomes important is because no matter how good of intelligence you have, if the policy of the administration is not right, they will not hear it. Let me give you the best example. In 1990, our intelligence agencies in the U.S. had very clear depictions of the Iraqi tank movements and troop movements towards Kuwait. But it was the preferred policy option of the George H.W. Bush administration to believe what it meant was that they're going to intimidate Kuwait into forgiving them the loans from the Iran-Iraq war of 8 years. So no matter how good the intelligence, if the policy and the strategic and operational view of the government is inaccurate or unresponsive, it's not going to be able to deal with it. In the case of Israel, strategically, they began to believe that for the last 2 years, Hamas was on a different path, that Hamas was willing to help the Gazans economically. Despite some warnings, not clear, articulate tactical warnings, but some good warnings. So strategically, their long-term view was there was looming threats outside, but not from Hamas. Operationally, this led to the military standing down, moving troops away from the border. Tactically, of course, as we know, the failure led to a very unresponsive IDF to the actual events that morning. So the rescues didn't come within the time it should have come. So the policy kind of perspective of the Israeli government was Gaza, or at least Hamas, was willing to work towards a better economic future of Gazans. Now, there was supposedly some warnings. Supposedly Egypt said something big's coming. CIA had said it said something big's coming. That doesn't mean a whole lot if you're strategically unprepared. And it's not a tactical indicator of anything. But there was some probably other warnings they could have paid attention to, the Israeli government, had they been willing to look for it. For example, Israel is would allow Hamas to have up to 1,250 trucks per day to help the economy. Hamas controlled the border and said, no, we only want 400. And so here's the problem. Hamas was gaining operational intelligence on the IDF while this was going on, and we had some warning, some general warning, but not a tactical warning. We had a webinar recently, right after the events, the Wednesday following, for SPME, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, with a retired Brigadier General, Yossi Kupperwasser, who indicated that, he had been in Gaza before since Israel pulled out in 2005. We probably didn't have good human intel assets there, that is Israel, but we had some good sensors, but they were all in the wrong place. They were all in the wrong place. So when Hamas operationally changed its tactics, changed its strategy, and fed Israel the belief that, yes, it was engaged in trying to treat the benefit of the Gazans, Israel was more than willing to believe it. The best deceptions feed into the ones you already want to believe. So what I would say to you is, yes, there was intelligence failures, but they were the small part of the picture. But unlike Western governments, and particularly unlike the United States, I think once the war is over, Israel, watch for it, Israel will actually have people resign or be fired from their jobs, unlike the United States. I don't believe anyone lost their job after 9/11 for that failure. So with that, I will introduce our first speaker, Professor Jeffrey Herf. He studies, actually, I just learned, Emeritus Professor Jeffrey Herf. Studies the intersection of ideas and politics in modern European history. Specializing in 20th century Germany, he has published extensively on Germany during the Weimar Republic, Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, and on West and East Germany during the Cold War. Please keep your comments to the end of our discussions. I'm going to time our speakers for 15 minutes each. And Professor Herf, would you join us in welcoming him?
Thank you very much. My bio is, I believe, in the program. In the next about 3 or 4 months, Routledge Publishers will publish a collection of my essays called Three Faces of Anti-Semitism, Right, Left, and Islamist. That is the second or third book in a series of books published by the London Center for the Study of Contemporary Anti-Semitism, the London Center for the Study of Contemporary Anti-Semitism. The first book in that series is by my colleague Matthias Kunzel, Nazism, Islamic Anti-Semitism, and the Middle East on the aftermath of World War II and the War of 1948. Kunzel's book was published first in 2019 in German, and now it is available in English, and I would encourage people to pay attention to it. The October 7th is one of the results of a set of ideas that began 86 years ago when Hashim al-Husseini published a text called Islam and the Jews. Islam and the Jews. And I discussed that work, and Kunzel discusses that work. I discussed that work in Nazi Propaganda for the Arab World, and Kunzel discusses it in this most recent book. There was a text that Husseini wrote for a pan-Arab meeting to be held in Blue Don, Syria in 1937. It was then, the basic argument of Islam and the Jews is that the Jews, since they rejected Muhammad's plea to convert, had been at war with Islam for many centuries. And that Islam had to defend itself against this Jewish aggression, that the plans in the 1930s to establish a Jewish state in Palestine were the most recent chapter of a centuries-long Jewish attack on the religion of Islam. Husseini was being hunted by the British military and did not appear to deliver the text in person in Blue Don. But German officials in Jerusalem and in Cairo became aware of Islam and the Jews, and in 1938, the Nazi regime published Islam and the Jews in German in a book published in Berlin. And I discussed that as well in Nazi Propaganda for the Arab World. And that was the beginning of a fateful fusion of Islamism. Husseini is really the most important founder in the Sunni world of Islamism, not Islam, but Islamism, a fusion of Islamism with Nazi ideology, propaganda, and policy. And as many of you know, he arrived in Berlin in November of 1941, and from 1941 to the spring of 1945, he and his entourage wrote and then broadcast shortwave radio broadcasts urging Arabs on occasion to kill the Jews before they kill you. October 7th expresses the spirit of Nazism in 2023. It expresses the spirit of the fusion of Islamism and Nazism of the 1930s and 1940s. A number of us have been making that point for the last 25 years. Paul Berman, Matthias Kunzel, myself, Bassem Tibi, Martin Coopers. There is a significant scholarship, and perhaps many of you in this room are aware of that scholarship. The New York Times and the Washington Post have refused to bring that scholarship to the attention of their readers. And so the discussion of Hamas in the American public discussion sometimes makes it appear as if it is a kind of more radical PLO. But as a historian of Nazism and in modern German history, one of the slogans or key phrases for historians of the Nazi regime is the problem of underestimation. The problem of underestimation. And we intellectual, cultural, and political historians have argued, and the German historians from Karl Bracher through Ian Kershaw have made the case that Hitler was very clear about what he intended to do. But what he intended to do was so absurd and so evil and so nutty that many people who were in positions of power didn't quite take him very seriously. We know that Jewish leaders in Europe took him seriously, but it's very difficult to take such ideas seriously as sources of policy. And a certain problem of underestimation affected the way that people responded to Hamas. And to this audience, I think I may be saying things that many of you are well aware of. But when I've spoken about these events in other contexts, I ask the audience how many people have read the Hamas Charter of 1988. And invariably, very few hands go up. So I'm going to assume that most of you have read it, but it is the single most important document in the Arab world. Iran is something else that continues the spirit of the fusion of Nazism and Islamism of the 1940s. It was translated into English and it was posted on the website of the Avalon Project at the Yale Law School about 20 years ago. So with a few mouse clicks, it's been easily available to anybody for 2 decades. Anyone who reads the Covenant of 1988 understands its connections and lineages to Nazism. For example, and again, forgive me if I'm saying things that are familiar to all of you. With their money, the Jews took control of the world media, news agencies, the press, publishing houses, broadcasting stations. With their money, they stirred revolutions in various parts of the world. They were behind the French Revolution, the Communist Revolution, and most of the revolutions we hear about. With their money, they formed secret societies such as the Freemasons, Rotary Clubs, the Lions, and others. With their money, they were able to control imperialist countries. They were behind World War I. They were behind efforts to destroy the Islamic Caliphate. The Balfour Declaration was an example of their power, and on and on. So the 1988 Covenant reeks of the very familiar conspiracy theories about Jewish power that were so important for fascism and Nazism in the 1930s and 1940s. It, however, if you look at the mainstream press, which I read every morning, and I am not one of those people that thinks the New York Times and the Washington Post are evil, but they could do better. The Hamas charter and its arguments do not appear in the pages of our leading newspapers. It would be as if we were fighting World War II and American readers didn't know what was in Mein Kampf or Hitler's speeches. Now, the after effect of the fusion of the 1940s was evident in the Muslim Brotherhood, which is anything but a moderate organization. Hassan al-Banna welcomed Husseini after the war. Hitler and Mussolini's defeat did not frighten you. He is a hero who challenged the empire and fought Zionism with the help of Hitler and Germany. Germany and Hitler are gone, but Amin al-Husseini will continue the struggle. Again, I may be saying things that are familiar to this audience, but the traditions that were rooted in the 1930s and 1940s continued in the Muslim Brotherhood, then in Sayyid Qutb, then in the Hamas Charter and its resulting policies. Now, as you also know, in 2017, a revised charter, revised Hamas charter was issued. And I reread it the other day, and what is clear is that the leaders of Hamas were in touch with Western human rights organizations who were telling them that the language of the 1988 charter was so obvious in its connections to Nazism and European radical anti-Semitism that it would be impossible on the basis of the 1988 charter to claim that Hamas was not in the tradition of the extreme right and fascism and Nazism. And so it cleans up the language. It leaves out the conspiracy theories about the Rotary clubs in World War I and the French Revolution, and suggests that Hamas would accept a Palestinian state as an interim measure, but it also states Palestine, which extends from the River Jordan in the east to the Mediterranean in the west, and from Ras al-Naqwa in the north to Arabic al-Rashrash in the south, is an integral territorial unit. It is the land and home of the Palestinian people. The expulsion and banishment of the Palestinian people from their land and the establishment of the Zionist entity therein do not annul the right of the Palestinian people to their entire land. Palestine is an Arab Islamic land, etc. And so it's very clear in the 2017 charter that the goal of Hamas remains the destruction of the state of Israel on the basis of its interpretation of Islam, an Islamist interpretation of Islam. This reconstruction of the ideological origins of Hamas still has not entered into the public discussion in the American press. I asked the editors of the Washington Post to publish an article, reprint an article I published in Quillette called The Ideology of Mass Murder, which goes over these issues. They declined. The culture and politics pages of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung in Frankfurt, which is along with the Süddeutsche Zeitung in Die Welt, the leading newspaper, prestige paper in Germany, published it on October 20th. So in a way, the discussion of the relationship between Islamism, anti-Semitism, and Hamas is more advanced in Germany today in the press than it is in the United States. Do I have any time left? 2 minutes. The events in the last 4 weeks remind me, as a historian of Nazi Germany, from the failure of the attempted coup in July of 1944 to the end of the war. And Ian Kershaw makes the point in his still best biography of Hitler that there was no way after the failure of the coup for the war to end because Hitler refused to surrender. And the amount of lives lost, German lives, not to mention the Holocaust in that, were enormous. I think it's important publicly for as many people from in as many different avenues to call on Hamas to surrender. I think that slogan, surrender now, give up your arms, and that call should come from as many governments and as many organizations as possible. And of course they won't, but just putting that in the public sphere, that the way to end this war is for Hamas to surrender, and to make clear that it is Hamas that bears the responsibility for this horrific loss of life that we're witnessing, is important. And second, and my last point, and this is a point that I'm sure many of you have thought about, and even The Economist magazine echoes it in its editorial this week, that there can be no peace in the Middle East as long as Hamas continues to exist as an organization. That Hamas is not the same as Nazi Germany. But there would be no peace in Europe after 1945 if some semblance of the Nazi regime had survived. And so it's very important that Israel win this war, as Secretary of State Blinken has stressed, paying as much attention as humanly possible to avoiding civilian casualties. I think it's also important regarding the civilian casualties issue to say, and I'll say this publicly, there are no reliable numbers about how many civilians have died in Gaza. We do not know. And the fact that the Washington Post and the New York Times cite the Hamas health ministry as a source is a problem. But I conclude with Hamas is not the same thing as Nazi Germany, but the spirit of Nazism, the spirit of the Einsatzgruppen, the spirit of mass murder of Jews was evident to the world on October 7th, and it's important that our students and faculty bring the scholarship about its ideological origins to the attention of students in our universities and colleges. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. That was excellent. Now, through Zoom, we have another professor speaking, Professor Noam Stillman. He is the Schusterman Yossi Professor Emeritus of Judaic History at the University of Oklahoma, and since 2016 has been visiting Distinguished Professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He is internationally recognized authority on the history and culture of the Islamic world and on Sephardi and Oriental Jewry. Professor Stillman, 15 minutes, and I may interrupt to give you a 2-minute heads up once you get going, but please, sir, start. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I am unmuted, am I not?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Noam.
Excellent, thank you. What I'd like to do in our discussion today is to offer some fundamental background, which I hope will provide a clearer understanding of the ideology, the worldview, and the political goals of Hamas as a militant Islamist Palestinian movement, which is rooted and evolved from the framework of modern political Islam, and which sets it apart from the other main Palestinian movement and military organization, the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, founded by Yasser Arafat in 1957, and which is currently the governing authority in the Palestinian entity in the West Bank. Hamas is the more recent of the two Palestinian movements, founded in 1987, and has since 2007 controlled the Gaza Strip, which it, I might add, violently wrested from the Palestinian National Authority, and has been in a sort of on-again, off-again conflict, what's referred to by Arab commentators as a niza, ever since. Hamas, as I mentioned a moment ago, was founded in 1987, December 10th, 1987 to be exact, 2 days after the outbreak of the First Intifada, by Ahmed Yassin, a paraplegic imam and school teacher, not a particularly frightening-looking individual, who grew up as a poor Palestinian refugee in Gaza. Yassin was a member of the Ikhwan al-Muslimun, the Islamic Brotherhood, whom we've already heard mentioned in Professor Herf's talk. And this is crucial for understanding Hamas's ideology and worldview, and indeed the mindset and worldview of Islamists who absorbed the teachings of Hassan al-Banna, who founded the Islamic Brotherhood in Cairo in 1928. Al-Banna was an Islamist, Salafi revivalist. The Salafi want to return to the way of the Aslaf, the forefathers, although I would point out there's a proverb in Islam that says, "Anas fi zamanihim ashbahu min aslafihim," that people in their own time are more like each other than they are like their ancestors. Al-Banna actually, at the same time as the Mufti Hajamin al-Husseini is also getting started, and both are influenced a great deal by Rashid Rida, another from Syria al-Kubra, Lebanon and Syria combined, Islamist. Al-Banna saw Islam, not nationalism or political philosophies, as the solution for the Muslim world's revival and liberation from European colonialism and domination. Al-Islam huwa al-hil. Islam is the solution, he said. He declared violence to be a useful, and again I'm quoting from his writings, a useful tool for political purposes. In a sense, this is something that, this is both Islamic and pre-Islamic. There are certain elements of pre-Islamic Arab culture which have remained within Islam. And one of them is the idea that man la yadlamu nas yudlamu. He who doesn't harm other people will be harmed himself. This is particularly important because here is something that's also that set Hassan al-Banna's and together with the other Islamists that followed him, including Ahmed Yassin and the Hamas movement, apart from traditional Islam, and that is an anti-Semitic worldview, which, as I and others have written about extensively, my colleague Jeffrey Herf has, on this panel, has talked about the particular Nazi influence. This was a patent import into the Islamic world, but already in the beginning of the 19th century, but it only really struck deep roots in the 20th. And this worldview was buttressed by the fantasies of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was translated into Arabic in Lebanon, actually by a Maronite priest in 1925, as the Mu'amarat al-Yahudiyya al-Shu'ub, the conspiracies of the Jewish conspiracies against the nations and the peoples, and published in Cairo. And it became a bestseller in the Arab world all the way up to the end of the 20th century. And I must say that when I worked in various Arab countries in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, I haven't been back since then, I had a practice of going to bookstores just to see if there were copies of the protocols. And I don't think I ever came into a bookstore where I didn't see one of the many editions of the protocols of the Elders of Zion. The protocols from the very beginning were an important text for Arab, Pan-Arab, and Palestinian nationalists, but Islamists such as the Ikhwan and later Hamas justified it with texts from the Quran and the Hadith. And these anti-Semitic tropes, which Jeffrey already mentioned, Jewish worldwide conspiracy, financial control, etc., these were expanded and in the widely disseminated writings of the philosopher of the Ikhwan movement, Sayyid Qutb, who was hanged by Nasser, by the way, in 1956. Al-Banna had already been assassinated by King Farouk's secret police in 1949. And here's something we should take note of. Arab regimes have been very wary of the Brotherhood. And at present, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Syria have all banned or outlawed it since they regard it as a threat to their own authority. Since inter alia, the Brotherhood's philosopher, Qutb, declared that secularist Muslims and Muslim states can be deemed kuffar. They can be deemed unbelievers and can be fought and killed. Of course, the official Brotherhood organization today claims it is a peaceful, democratic organization, that its leaders condemn violence and violent acts. And this, of course, as the newer covenant of Hamas, is a classic example of what we call taqiyya, permissible lying to non-Muslims for the protection of Islam. It's used most of all by Shiites to protect themselves, by the way, from Sunnis. And I would, but all Muslims can use it when it comes to non-Muslims. And I would note that it's no coincidence that the Ikhwan's principal state backer is none other than Qatar, the primary funder of Hamas, and at times the intermediary for it with Israel at the moment, for example, with the hostage crisis. And I'm sure that everyone at this session knows that Ismail Haniyeh, the senior political leader of Hamas, is resident in Doha, the capital of Qatar, and met there with Iran's foreign minister, Hussein Amir Abdullahian, just over 2 weeks ago, right? 2 weeks and 1 day. And of course that Qatar is the primary funder of Hamas, and at times, as I said, intermediary with Israel. Now, after this sort of lengthy excursus on the Brotherhood, but I'll continue with it as well, because I believe it is essential for an understanding of the ideological soil from which Hamas grew. And I want to turn to, for a minute, to the historical evolution of the movement, which also fits the pattern of other offshoots of the Islamic Brotherhood. As I mentioned, the founder of the movement was Ahmed Yassin, just after the outbreak of the First Intifada. 14 years earlier, in 1973, he founded a charity. Again, this is typical of both of the Ikhwan and of the Ikhwan's various offshoots. To start as a charity, it was called Al-Mujamma' Al-Islami, the Islamic Center. The charity opened clinics, daycare centers, blood banks, youth clubs, and mosques. And again, this is following the Brotherhood, which began the same way, and continues actually the same way, but also having a militant side. In fact, the Mujamma' was actually recognized as a legitimate charity in 1979 by Israel, which still administered the Gaza Strip at the time. The Israelis considered it less militant, how I don't know, than Fatah, than PLO. And also, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, during his long term over the past 2 decades, for most of it, considered it as a good counterforce to the administration in Ramallah. And the Israeli administration allowed it to set up schools, clubs, and even the Islamic University of Gaza, which, by the way, was the first institution of higher learning in the Gaza Strip. Egypt never had an institution of higher learning. And a number of today's Hamas leaders received their education, notably Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the organization, Yahya Sinwar, the head in Gaza, and Mohammed Deif, the supreme commander of the Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas. And by the way, Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam was a Syro-Lebanese fundamentalist, also was killed by the British police in 1935. But then in 1984, Tzahal raided a Mujamma mosque and found a weapons cache there. Yassin was arrested, but a year later he was released as part of the so-called Jibril agreement.
Professor Stillman, just wanted to give you a heads up. 2 minutes, please.
2 minutes. Okay, then Prime Minister Shimon Peres freed 1,150 prisoners in exchange for 3 Israelis captured in the First Lebanon War. In any case, 2.5 years later, Yassin founded Hamas as an independent Islamic Palestinian organization, and its ideological ties to the Islamic Brotherhood can be seen in its logo with the crossed swords of jihad, just as in the Ikhwan's logo. And in fact, in its covenant or charter of 1988, in Article 2, it declares it is, and I quote, one of the wings of the Muslim Brotherhood in Palestine, end quote. And in addition to, of course, all of the anti-Semitic statements in it, which Jeffrey mentioned in his talk, there also are things that are specifically in the realm of Islamist doctrine. One of them, first of all, it says Allah is the goal, the Prophet is the model, Quran is the constitution, jihad is the path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of wishes. But it also cites the famous hadith in the 2 Sahihain, the two Orthodox Islamic traditions associated with Muhammad, and that is, on the day of judgment will come and Muslims will fight the Jews, killing the Jews, when the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, and the stone or the tree would say, "O Muslim, O servant of God, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Ta'ala faqtulhu." And this you find this repeated over and over again in Islamist texts. Since I assume I'm just about out of time, I would just point out that that it also says that they would eventually unite with PLO when it becomes Islamic. In other words, it did not consider it Islamic, and therefore, of course, and I agree completely with Professor Herf that the new constitution is purely an example of taqiyya, and that when one reads between the lines, one sees that it's the same outcome. And I would also point out that one of the founders, along with Ahmed Yassin, said that that in no way has, and this was Mahmoud Az-Zahar, that he stated outright that the original charter was still the valid one.
Thank you, Professor.
I will end with that.
Great.
And we go over to the next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Stillman. Very well done. Our next guest speaker is Dr. Harel Chorev, and I probably mispronounced your name, and I apologize for that. He's the head of the Doron Halpern Middle East Network Analysis Desk at the Moshe Dayan Center. Chorev is a historian focusing on informal networks in the Middle East and their analysis with tools combining empirical historical study and network theory. Dr. Harel, please.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm experiencing here some technical problems, but hopefully we will overcome it. I was supposed to be there, of course, but unfortunately the war prevented me from coming. And I'm fully mobilized, I must say, to this issue. And I would like to share with you some of the things, insights that are gathered through this month. So it would be slightly personal, if you don't mind. It won't be totally academic, because it is personal. It is personal. I know that every one of you understands that, given the circumstances, but I would like even to, to exemplify it. Just 100 meters away from me, sitting a family who lost their daughter in the Nova party. She was murdered, and luckily she was found only 4 days after, and not like others still missing. Friends of ours, American citizens, their son in Golani, kidnapped by Hamas. And other two couples missing, murdered, and so on and so forth. So it's very personal, and I think it would be okay to use some personal perspective here, of course, combined with my professional academic perspective. Because what I want to share with you are a few points, and I'll try to do it as brief as I can, because I really want to hear the questions and to address it. And the first one is my own shock, all right? My own, let's say, postmortem is not a good word, it's a big word, but as a researcher, something that I see as a failure. And that is the fact that despite of the many times that I wrote about Hamas dehumanization of Jews and Israelis, and you can find it in all my articles about Hamas, about the way they behave online, I described it. I brought examples of all sorts of horrible caricatures. I'll describe one because I wanted to show it to you, but unfortunately the technical issues prevented me from that. For example, following the terror attack in one of Jerusalem's bus stops just less than a year ago, it was February 23. A yeshiva guy named Alter Lederman was killed alongside with two little kids in that bus stop by a car attack, a ramming attack. Hamas immediately used this incident because what we saw, the pictures of that yeshiva student was of, a typical yeshiva guy with a typical yeshiva big hat like that. And Hamas took it and replanted it in a makluba dish. Makluba dish is a very Palestinian dish, a very typical Palestinian dish made up of rice and so on and so forth. And the title was, so you see the makluba dish, you see his head inside of that makluba dish, and you see a Palestinian family eating with eager that makluba. And it says in Arabic, a great Friday, the attack happened in Friday, a great Palestinian makluba. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, the levels of dehumanization here are really stunning. Stunning. They don't see us as human. We are cockroaches for them. And it was not the only time, okay? I'm just giving you one example. I can give you dozens and dozens of examples of how Hamas framed the discourse online as a main tool for obviously the younger generation, including its so-called warriors, Okay, anyone who is online, and naturally all the younger generation of Hamas as well are online, and they use the online sphere to frame a discourse that absolutely took from us, Israelis and Jews, our humanity. I described that caricature, but you can see all sorts of video games where you are supposed to kill as many as Jews as you can. Really horrifying pictures of other attacks, like the one that took place in Hawa, of killing two brothers. And everything is, of course, followed with hard slogans like beat them with your bullets, kill as much as you can. All sorts of videos that really prepares the ordinary Palestinian not only to dehumanize the Jew, but also how to execute an efficient attack. I was interested in it because my speciality is on lone wolf attacks, and it was part of it. Having said that, and despite of the fact that I was fully aware of what they're doing, and I gave it a name, you know, there an article of mine it's hopefully will be published very soon, and you will see dehumanization. It was before the October 7th. Despite of that, I didn't move my, knowing to internalization, which is always the problem, whether you are in intelligence, or you are academic as myself. And when it all happened, I, like everyone, I was devastated by it. And from the professional point of view, I had to admit that I didn't anticipate how far they would go. Okay, and I think really the void is placed exactly in that psychological place that I've pointed out. There is a difference between knowing and really internalizing it. We see it, it's a failure of so many wars. We often speak about the Yom Kippur War. That's also a typical failure of this, exactly the same kind. You know that the Egyptians are on the borders. You know that the Syrians are deploying, and still you don't internalize it. So this is what happened to me with Hamas. Also, I would like to have a few remarks or to note a few remarks about geopolitics and the kidnapped, because these are currently, I think these are the main or the key issues that we're dealing here with in Israel, and I think it's important. First of all, in terms of Hamas strategy currently, when Hamas, I forgot to mention, I volunteered for the headquarters of the families, and I actually built for them a department consisting 10 researchers, both great Arabists and also people who are specialized on Iran, speak Farsi, of course. So we collect everything basically that comes out from Hamas statements, Qatar, Iran, everyone. And pretty soon I came to the conclusion that there's nothing in it. And I don't want just to title it, as psychological warfare. Of course it's a psychological warfare, but what is the reason for, or what are the intentions behind it? And my answer to you is that Hamas, from the very beginning of the ground defense of the ground attack of the IDF, want to prevent that, want to freeze the situation on ground. It doesn't mean to talk about any kidnapped at the moment. Everything is a lip service. And at the end of the day, they want to stop it here for a long time in order to prevent Israel from returning to this attack. You know, in Israel, it became also almost a cliche, this brilliant idea of giving them all their 6,000 prisoners. Now it's already 8,000 because Israel arrested many of them, and then to attack them. Obviously, it cannot work, and Hamas knows it very well, and they want to freeze any operation on ground in order to start discussing. So whatever we hear regarding this issue of negotiation, really, I don't see any value to it, while we should keep in mind, at least to my humble opinion, what are the real strategy here in terms of the kidnap. And even if we would answer this kind of strategy, it would take us months and months in let's say in the most positive scenario to get those people back. One last thing is regarding geopolitics, as I said. Technicalities. Okay. Geopolitics. I think it's important to explain Israel's state of mind at the moment, and I see really that 99% of the people are united in this, not because of revenge, not because of anything like that, but rather because I think so many understands the horrific implications in case we won't destroy Hamas until the last stone of this horrible organization. And why is that? Because the blast, the circle of blast, if you'd like, will cross through all the way from the local Israeli sphere, preventing any of our citizens in the south and even in the north from coming back to their homes. They won't do that because their trust is really ruined. We need to understand that their trust is ruined, and we need to reconstruct this trust. And we won't be able to do that without fully destroying Hamas. Second, the West Bank will be terribly undermined, I believe, if Hamas will come out a winner, victorious. Because in that sense, we need to understand that the whole concept of mukawama, winning for the resistance axis is not just, in traditional terms of territory. Winning is if I'm still shooting at you, if I'm still launching rockets at you, even if you're above my head, even if you stuck your flag on it, I'm the winner.
Dr. Chorev, excuse me, just 2 minutes left, please.
Sure. I'm almost done. So this is their definition of victory, which is totally different from the, let's say, common traditional one. So if Hamas won't be destroyed, the Palestinian Authority will collapse, of course, because Hamas will come stronger. The whole Iranian axis in this area will come stronger against the pro-Western countries and the pro-American, of course, the American allies. And we already see clear signs of how this conflict is becoming a global issue. Russia, for example, it was exposed on the New York Times, was involved in cyber warfare against us, okay? And Iran, naturally. I think the Americans understand that, but this kind of internalization, I believe, is really essential to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.